coaching is such a huge thing, but who gets all the coaching? It's the kids. It's the players. Parents don't get much coaching. Coaches don't get much coaching. So the question I have is, who's coaching the coaches? Who's coaching the parents? Who's helping these people to be the best they can be? Because leadership in amateur sports and leadership in youth sports, I think, is a huge issue.
Absolutely.
We've got to get better at it.
I've kind of transitioned from a fundamental mechanics coach more to a mental passion type of coach.
Here are things that I recognize about myself, that I did, mistakes that I made, that I don't want to see other people make. And if I can help someone in any way at all, let me do this. Let me get this out there and make it available. And it was sort of a way of coaching the coach. This is the Coaching Life Podcast, and it's going to be a lot of honest, open, transparent, candid talk about coaching, parenting, and player development in all of amateur sports. Your hosts, Chris Stewart and Pat Martin, will lead the discussion. We're really glad that you decided to join it. So, without further ado, let's get started. Here we go, Pat.
Sounds good.
So, you and I have been talking for a while now about, well, actually, we haven't been talking for a while about doing a podcast, but that's something that came up pretty recently. But it was something that as soon as it was mentioned, we both went, why haven't we thought of this sooner?
Light bulb, right?
Yeah. Well, why? I mean, but here's the problem. There are over right now 540,000 or more podcasts out there in the world. Why would we assume that we have something to say that is different? What's going to make ours different from not just those 540,000 podcasts, but thousands of those are sports related, coaching related, parenting related. What do you think?
Well, personally for me, I think the audience for us is what makes it different, because we're kind of grounded in our community. We have a lot of thought as to what we need to do to make our community better, or our communities. And for us, I think to give someone in our community, in our area, the accessibility to a podcast like this, where we're going to talk about sports and talk about baseball and coaching and all these different things that might be able to help them become better coaches, help them become better people. I just think it's an opportunity for people in the southeastern Ohio area to get involved.
So it brings a more localized feel to the podcast world. I mean, I guess we could recommend certain sports podcasts. Like I listen to several myself. The ABCA, the American Baseball Coaches Association podcast. I listen to Top Coach podcast, Ahead of the Game by Jonathan Gellner, Baseball Outside the Boxers. I mean, I can just go on and list all these podcasts I listen to. The content that we are going to talk about may actually, because we live here in Appalachia, we are part of we see the tension between rec ball versus travel ball. We see the small town coaching challenges, parent coach challenges, parenting challenges with kids playing ball and things like that, that maybe this particular podcast might be a little more relevant to those that in this particular region.
Exactly. And I think
or maybe even other regions all over the country that are in small towns like this as well. Who knows?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I think sometimes global. When someone says, well, I listen to this podcast, and they, you recommend that to somebody else, there might be a little intimidation factor there, where, they're like, it sounds like a good idea, but they never get, they never ever go to it. And, here we have the opportunity to say, hey, Chris Stewart and Pat Martin are doing a podcast, and people
that ought to be enough, right?
Yeah,
just those two names alone.
Exactly. But no, it just seems like it's to me it's just a gateway to begin a conversation and to include a lot of people that right now aren't really indulging in things like this.
Yeah. Well, why don't we talk about some of the things that we envision this what will we be talking about actually, and I know that when this idea really began to solidify, it was after I posted an article on my blog talking about a player development program and particularly talking about it in such a way to where I actually had the audacity to say, just blow up what you're doing. Rec leagues, blow up what you're doing. Travel teams, forget about, going to hundreds of tournaments, and spending hundreds of dollars on 8 or 9 tournaments a summer, and try this. And we outlined that. And I know that we plan to talk in more depth about the player development program in another episode, but I know that's sort of what prompted this, along with a couple other posts. Probably the playing without uniforms one, where we talked a little bit about unstructured free play and how there just seems to be so little of that today as there was when you and I played when we were growing up.
Well, I think over the years there's been a lot of thoughts that I've had about baseball and about youth sports, and sometimes I felt like maybe I was kind of in a silo. And there weren't a lot of people out there that felt the same way that I did, and didn't, there just wasn't a large group of people that kind of had the same ideas. But as blog articles came out and as books were written and things like that, and I began to be able to talk to people more and more about some of those thoughts, I learned that there were people that had the same thoughts, and not only that, but there were people that maybe not had the same thoughts, but were willing to have a conversation.
Yeah, and you find that out when you post this on social media.
Yeah, definitely.
You send the link to a blog post on Facebook or Twitter, and then you see immediately the comments and the shares that start to build up, and particularly the one about player development program, it immediately began to build up comments. This is some where people saying, gosh, we got to do this. How can we be part of this? And
right.
and others were people who maybe were not as excited about the idea.
True.
maybe wanting to justify some of the things that I mentioned that I felt were problems in the other structures.
Right, and I think there might have been some misunderstandings there. But as far as the podcast goes, I don't know that we have a limitation on the subjects and the topics that we're going to talk about. I think we'll talk about anything from baseball to parenthood.
Leadership. I mean, it's going to be. I come into it thinking, man, there's so much that needs to be talked about in the realm of amateur sports. And when I say amateur sports, I'm talking about anyone that's not getting paid to do this. And so it could really realistically be from college all the way down. But I'd say the big issue is youth. Mm-hmm. Because if you think about it, I was thinking about this today, because one of the questions you and I asked ourselves is what is the main purpose of this? Why would we want to do this? What are our goals? And for me to answer that question, I think the best way for me to answer it is I want to be useful that was my goal as a coach. See, I'm not currently coaching anything right now. And that's actually what prompted me to write a book was that I had coaching inside me and it had to come out in some way. And so the way for it to come out for me was writing. I love to write. It was the way for me to get it out. So I wrote a blog. That blog then morphed into a potential book and self-published a book that was basically all about coaching. And what it was really primarily about was errors that I had made over the years as a coach and as a dad who coached his own kids. And basically me saying, listen, here are things that I recognize about myself that I did, mistakes that I made that I don't want to see other people make. And if I can help someone in any way at all through this writing, then let me do this. Let me get this out there and make it available. And it was sort of a way of coaching the coach, because the thought that I had was, coaching is such a huge thing. But who gets all the coaching? Like in a youth organization, let's say you got a youth rec ball organization, you've got a bunch of kids that are signed up to play, and then you get coaches for those teams, which are usually dads. 95% of them are probably dads. Every now and then you get the stray, young, just out of high school students,
right.
Like, I want to coach. But who is getting all of the coaching? It's the kids. It's the players. Parents don't get much coaching. Coaches don't get much coaching. So the question I have is, who's coaching the coaches? Who's coaching the parents? Who's helping these people to be the best they can be? Because leadership in an amateur sports level, in amateur sports and leadership in youth sports, I think is a huge issue.
Absolutely.
We've got to get better at it. We've got to get better. And that's where my my passion for getting this word out in a different medium, not just in writing, but in a podcast form, comes into play.
Right. And there's so many resources out there to be a better coach, to be, to be a better leader. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying about the accessibility for people in our community, because it's hard to choose, just baseball in specific, it's hard to choose what information is the correct information.
Yeah.
So I think, one of the things that we can do is just be a resource for people out there to be better coaches and better leaders.
And offer those resources that we have really gleaned from as well.
Exactly. Yeah. That being said, who do you think this podcast will be for? Who will benefit most from it?
I think probably. I don't want to throw percentages out because I don't have actual research on this, and so I will just say the majority. It seems the majority of coaches in amateur athletics, in the amateur athletics world, are untrained dads or moms. I'm seeing a lot more moms coaching youth sports as well, which is okay. And I want to make sure to say that. I want to make this disclaimer up front. Daddy ball is not a bad thing in and of itself. Right. The reason daddy ball, I think, gets a bad rap is because of the old, notion that daddies only want to coach so that they can play little junior all the time more than maybe perhaps he deserves or she deserves. And I think that's maybe maybe that probably does happen, but not as much as people think it happens. Right. I think the problem with daddy ball is that a lot of times dads just don't know what they're doing. I mean, and I hate to say that because, what that does is it causes someone right now who's listening to this to get mad and turn it off because they get offended. But what I mean by don't know what you're doing is we don't typically provide a lot of help for coaches who sign up to coach in youth sports. We don't provide a lot of training for them, or it's voluntary, or it happens once, and not just coaching, but parenting as well. One of the biggest problems in youth sports, just turn on YouTube and do a search for fights at youth ballparks and see how many links you get. It's hard to be a parent these days at these places because of the craziness that takes place. And so what happened? How do we deal with that? Well, here's what we do. Even high schools, we have one meeting at the beginning of the season to go over all the expectations and goals. And we may have one coaching clinic, one time period throughout the year where you go and you learn some things and you get the knowledge that you need. You network with other coaches or whatever. In youth ball, rec ball, or travel organizations, they may have something similar where you have one opportunity for a coaching meeting. But other than that, it's going to be completely dependent upon that particular coach or that dad coach or that mom coach to seek out the resources and have a desire to get better, to be the best coach that they can be for those kids, to learn how to put together an effective practice plan, to learn how to handle certain situations that arise among a team that maybe you weren't prepared for because it's not strategic. It's just personal situation, just all those little things. And I don't know that there's a lot of that out there. And I think we can be that. But this can be that for people. Or it can start as that, maybe, as we talk more about the value of leagues and organizations creating that opportunity for their coaches.
Right, absolutely.
And their parents. To answer your question, I think 90% of this is going to be for coaches. But a lot of those coaches are also parents. So coaches/parents.
Exactly. I think you're spot on with daddy ball. A lot of people don't realize that daddy ball's a necessity for youth baseball and youth sports.
It is. In general. You would have no coaches. You'd have 3 or 4 coaches.
It'd be very slim. It'd be, there wouldn't be a lot of opportunity out there for kids to play. Definitely. So, but yeah, coaches and I'd just say people that are interested in developing youth athletes and developing the youth in our community. It'll be for those people. So.
Because it's not, there are a lot of people who have a heart to see the nature of youth sports grow and become more positive, who don't have any other stake in the game. They don't have children or grandchildren playing anymore. They just love where they live. They love they love kids, and they love the sport that they happen to be overseeing, whether it be football, baseball, basketball, soccer, whatever it is. And they want to help in some way. A lot of times those are your league presidents or maybe your travel organization president or whoever, and they provide the structure, the basic structure for everyone. And, we don't want to definitely don't want to downplay any of the work that those people have done.
Sure.
But again, everyone who is involved in putting together a quality program for kids should make it their goal to want to be the best they can be, to make whatever changes necessary to make it better. Because who is it for? It is ultimately all about the kids.
Right.
And that's actually, one of the answers that I gave for this question, who's this podcast for? I think it's also for the kids. Yes. It's for athletes. Mm-hmm. I think, if a kid wants to, we'll provide some topics, about, one of the things I thought about talking about was the recruiting process. I got a lot of kids asking me all the time, what do I need to be doing? And they're asking me that as 8th graders and, freshmen in high school and sophomores and things. And so I'm answering those questions for them, but those are coming through text messages or just one-on-one kids that I'm working with through personal training or whatever. But if we can give them a link and say, hey, we're doing an entire episode on the recruiting process, make sure you download this and take notes. And I think it could be really super helpful.
Yeah. I think all the time things come up that people that may not be coaches or, they're watching, grandparents, family members, whatever, they'll see something that's happening in a league or happening in a game and they'll recognize that they might not agree with it or it might not make much sense to them, but they don't know what to do with that information. They don't know where to go with it. And, in the same topic there of recruitment, people aren't for sure how to go about that process. And the podcast will kind of provide a centralized discussion point for between us and other people that have been through the process.
You wouldn't believe the number of people that have texted me or sent me a message on social media that have said, hey, you need to write a blog post about this or whatever. And they'll have an idea for me and I'll put a little note to do that. And then sometimes I've gotten to it and so I still have a backlog of things that I still want to write about, but we should do the same thing with this is just say, hey, if you're listening or if something happens in a game and you need a way, you'd like to hear more talk about it or you'd like to provide input about it, make a note, give us, shoot us a message or send us an email and we'll banter about it back and forth here. We'll have you come in. We'll have you as a guest and talk with you about it as well. So.
Yeah, because for me, that's what it's about. It's about the conversation.
Yeah.
And just opening it up to different ideas and including as many people as possible as we can in that conversation to give people the best opportunity to get better.
I can envision us bringing in moms and just saying, from your perspective, what do you when you're sitting behind that fence and you're watching your child play, what's going through your mind?
What are you thinking?
Yep.
Yes.
Bringing in dad coaches. I'm a dad coach. You're a dad coach. Yes. Bringing in, travel ball coaches, bringing in high school coaches, maybe bring those two guys in at the same time, the travel and the high school coach and let them talk out, about the differences and some of the challenges that take place with training those same players basically in different ways, perhaps sometimes. American Legion coaches, youth coaches, we've talked mostly about baseball here,
coaches
but
different sports,
football, football, soccer, tennis, softball, golf, whatever.
I think for us, it just seemed like everything kind of fell in place to do it, to be able to do it, with the time and location.
I tell you what, if you and I had the same chemistry in a podcast that we do on text messages, this thing is going to go worldwide viral.
Hey. I told my wife Chastity that I was planning on quitting my job in a couple of years and on TV,
pump
radio.
The brakes there,
time,
friend.
So.
But yeah, that's right. So but, nothing wrong with dreaming big.
No, I think that, absolutely dream big, swing big, right?
Big Daddy hacks.
Here we go. I think we'll just be limited by interest, really. Yeah. I think as long as people want to engage and as long as they want to listen, there really isn't going to be a limitation to what we'll be able to do and how long we'll be able to go. So,
and by all means, I think this should be said as well. Sometimes the reason why people, I think, choose not to pursue doing something like what you and I are doing is because of this little thing that I've talked about before in my writing called imposter syndrome. And I had this tremendously when I decided to write a book. I had the tools, I had the words, I had everything ready to go. God has been good to me and given me skills that I've learned throughout, different careers that I've had or whatever. So I knew I could self-publish a book. But the problem with that is it seems so arrogant to be able to do, that you get this thing called, I don't know, have you ever had imposter syndrome is where you're like, who really is going to listen to anything I have to say? I mean, I feel like, I'm not really an expert in this. And so it I think becomes hard because, we don't want to assume that everything that you and I are going to talk about, we're the experts on it. We just, like, as you said, we just want to open the conversation. There might be a lot of people out there that want to have the conversation. We just happen to have a resource that we can provide room for a conversation
right.
about it.
Well, I'm here to validate you, right?
Yeah, that's why I brought you on, Pat.
You're definitely not an imposter, and me, I'm not an imposter because I have two strengths. I'm very resourceful, so I like to pull resources and I like to make those available for people.
You are that,
and I have failed many times.
That's a great strength.
Yes, in my endeavor as a coach and as a parent. So, as I'm on this mic right now, what I am is a failure, and I don't have any reservations about pretending to be that because that's what I am.
Well,
so hopefully people can learn from that.
I will second that I'm not seconding that you're a failure, but I will be quick to say that I too am a failure. As I mentioned, was the background for a lot of the writing that I put in those two books.
I just finished reading the book. I know you've read it, Relentless by Tim Grover, and he talks about how difficult it is to improve the people that he works with, guys like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, Dwayne Wade. He's like, these guys are the best that of the people that play their game. They're the best of them, and if you think it's easy to improve on that, you're crazy. But I think the flip side of that, in failure, it makes getting better easier, right? It's easier to improve when you fail. You know what areas you have to improve in. If you're just winning all the time, if you're just succeeding all the time, you're doing well.
Yeah.
But you don't know if really you're reaching your maximum potential.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, man, our goal for listeners, we want to try to give you something that you can listen to on your way to work. And we're assuming that a lot of people's commute to work is no more than 15 to 30 minutes. And so our goal is to make these episodes once a week, about 30 minutes long or so. If it may go, it's going to vary a little bit, a little shorter, a little longer, depending on what we're talking about. If we have to split some things up, sometimes we will. But we're going to talk about a lot of things, as we mentioned. We're going to talk about leadership in youth sports, and that comes from, the culture that's created through coaching, but also it comes from the interactions and the communication that you have with parents and the kids. We're going to talk about practice coaching versus game coaching. We're going to talk about coaching versus parenting, and being the same thing on the same field, the same court at the same time, interacting with officials. We're going to talk about strength training, something that I'm very passionate about, and when to start doing that, and some of the different ideas that have come to place with younger kids being more engaged in strength training. As I mentioned, college recruiting, travel ball, rec ball, Legion ball, other kinds of ball, depending on what it is that that you might do, player development. Different kinds of things like habits that build strong teams, habits that kill teams, just all sorts of things. I mean, I as we mentioned, I think that the topics will just sort of come up and they'll be unlimited, really, in a way. And our hope is to just sort of maybe open conversations to try to create really good, positive cultures in the areas that we serve these kids. And that's, we recognize everybody's doing that. No one's getting paid astronomical. I mean, no one's getting paid to do a lot of the work that we're talking about. This is voluntary work. And so there's rarely an incentive to want to be as good as you can be, because who has time for it? Who has time for training, for going to weekly coaches meetings and learning how, we practice. You may practice 2 or 3 times a week. We'll talk about the number of times we practice too next week. But we practice the kids, and we talk about how it's so valuable to get training and leadership development for coaches and even for parents. But what's the structure for that, and who has time to do it?
Sure.
Well, this is a medium where that can happen.
Yes, absolutely. We've been talking about it, but there's people out there right now that want their kid to be the best that they can be, and they just don't know how to get them to that point. And that's what we're going to try to do. We're going to try to bring together as many resources as we can, as many thoughts, as many conversations, and just provide people that information so that they can do their best to help their child, or to help them reach their potential. So it's going to be a fun time.
I think so.
Yeah, and as far as sharing it with people, I think a lot of times there's some hesitancy to even bring up conversations like this. Some of the things that we're going to talk about, just because there's all kinds of different opinions out there. There's all kinds of different approaches, and you can just do things like if you text someone that you think would be interested in the podcast, and you say, "What do you think of this?" or have you seen this? You don't have to engage in the conversation yourself, but anybody that you think could benefit from the podcast, or anybody that you think could contribute to the podcast in some way, we would definitely appreciate sharing it with them. So
no doubt about it. And one of the best things you could do is just simply talk about it.
Absolutely.
When you're out there, if you're at an open gym, or you're at your kid's practice, or if you happen to run into someone at the grocery store and you're talking sports or whatever, and you happen to have heard us talk about something, just let people know, hey, by the way, there's some guys that these guys, they don't know what they're talking about, but they're trying to do a podcast, and it might be helpful. It might be something you might be interested in. Give it a shot, and just talk about it. We'll see.
It's funny you say that, and the thought just popped in my head, because the truth is that everything that we talk about now, however long we do this, over the next year, 2, 5 years, everything that we talk about in 10 years, if you would go back and listen to what we talk about, we probably won't know what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Because the youth sports change so much, and the game of baseball, the approach to all different sports,
in fact,
changes so much.
I would even say that one of the reasons behind why we're doing this is because of the rapidly changing environment of youth sports. Yet there are so many who are hesitant to either embrace that change, or to adapt to that change, or to even come up with really good positive ways to combat it if they believe that combating it is necessary.
They don't know what to do.
Yeah, because we're not saying that all the change is good. There's a lot of negative things right now with travel baseball. I mean, that's the game I know. It may be the same for soccer. I have done some research, and there are a lot more player development programs in the world of soccer right now, and that just might be because travel soccer has been around a lot longer than travel baseball. But it's happening, and I'm seeing it in the softball world as well, perhaps for the same reason. Travel softball has been around longer than travel baseball. I think that's a lot of the reason is because maybe rec softball hasn't been as strong as rec baseball has been. That's just my guess. I don't know, but it's my theory, I suppose. But to get back to the point, there is a lot of change happening, and we're either going to just continue doing things the way we always did, and we're going to see less and less kids have a desire to play. And so we're going to have to consolidate teams. We're going to see less and less dads or people, quality people who would really be good coaches want to volunteer to coach because they don't like the options that they have. And so their kids start doing other things. And we can blame video games, and we can blame all kinds of things. You recently wrote about this as well. Yeah, you recently wrote an article about this, Pat. But the truth is, what are we doing? What are we providing that's better? That makes a kid say, "Man, I really want to do this.
Right.
I love this. I love what you guys are doing." You got to bring value, and if there's no longer any value in the organization that you're running, then it's going to die.
Right, exactly. I think that's one of the biggest things that have hit me personally over the last 5 or 6 years is. I've kind of transitioned from a fundamental mechanics coach more to a mental passion type of coach, and we're not doing enough.
There's an episode.
Yeah, exactly.
Put a mark on that.
We're not doing enough globally to nurture the love of the game, and again, forefront right here. I'm one of the biggest failures of that. So I have a license to talk about that and share some information that might be able to help other people.
Yeah. Well, do you have any closing thoughts for today? I mean, we got to wrap up what we're doing here today.
No, I hope people are interested in the podcast. I hope no one's turned off by it by, like Chris said, just two guys here that don't know what they're talking about. The whole goal is to bring as many people together that do know what they're talking about,
Yeah.
and that do have participation in youth sports and that can make a difference. So I hope it's something people can get behind and people can contribute to.
Definitely. When we come back together the next episode, we're going to just jump right in and unfold the idea that that was brought up a couple weeks ago, where I just said, "Hey, let's start something new," and I sort of designed a player development program and said, what if instead of your 8 tournaments a summer travel program, instead of your 30 games a summer with only 1 practice a week rec ball program, what if we did this instead? And can it be done? And if it can, why not just start doing it? Why don't we just start making it happen? And so Pat and I are going to talk about that. It's a player development program idea. It's going to be based on baseball and softball, but it will also, I think, be relevant to other sports. If you just take what we talk about and apply it to whatever sport you're passionate about, we think the principles are the same. And we're really excited to talk about that. In fact, I'd love to just go ahead and jump right into it right now. But instead of doing that, let's just save that for the next one.
Sounds good to me.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.